Good thing Google wasn't in charge of Best Picture years and stuff like that, or else On the Waterfront would have been the correct answer, according to
Welcome to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, TV shows, music, video games, foodstuffs, and more from three people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, and Aaron Dicer.
Come on, they're a Jewish delicacy. Before Toby eats it.
I'm retaining water for your information.
You and the Grand Coulee Dam. Come on, you don't know what you're missing.
I'm quite familiar with Rugula, thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's episode 113 of Recotopia. I'm Chris Atkinson, joined by Aaron Dicer.
Hi, Lehos and Arinos.
And I'm also joined by Jeremy Scott, who is having his last episode for a while on this one. Yeah, he's going to have the 6-month sabbatical, and I'm going to tell you, I recommend it.
Maybe it'll cure his tired blood.
Maybe it will. Today's big recommend is Quiz Show. About time, right? 30 years this movie has been out, and it was a Best Picture nominee, but it's about time we talked about it here on the podcast. But does anybody have, well, we've got to acknowledge chat too. This has been a weird day. Acknowledge chat as well. Thanks for coming out and talking and watching us talk about movies on a Tuesday. We appreciate you very much for coming out. All right. Does anybody have any small recommends?
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light.
It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
Jeremy does. My brother's family came to town this weekend, and whenever my brother's family comes to town, we try and carve out some time to watch movies. We watched 2 movies. One was Hundreds of Beavers, which you'll hear a little bit more about later in the show, and I highly recommend. But then the second one we watched, my sister-in-law recommended The Personal History of David Copperfield, which is a movie that I was not even barely aware of. This is because it came out in 2020, right in the heart of the beginning of the pandemic, and was just buried by all of the other news in the world. This is Dev Patel at his very best. It is charming, whimsical, hilarious, devastating, and it's Armando Iannucci, which I didn't know until I was done. And my brother and I were talking about how the David Copperfield film uses actors of whatever race they want in the roles, and it's not about that. It's about the best actor for the role. And I go, hey, we just talked about Death of Stalin on our podcast and how he let people use whatever their accent was. And Steve Buscemi's playing this, Russian guy, but he just sounds like Steve Buscemi, not knowing they're both Iannucci films while I'm having this conversation. So Iannucci is now an official friend of the show. I would say Peter Capaldi and Hugh Laurie almost steal the show in this movie. They're both always great, but I wish this movie had a wider audience because it's fantastic, and it just got completely pushed aside by the events of the world. It's on Hulu if you're vaguely interested. Highly recommend it. I think it would be a good time had by all. There you go.
I never saw this. I remember when it came out, and I was surprised to see Armando Iannucci was a part of it. Does it have any of his kind of dialogue at all in it, or is it kind of a straightforward thing?
It is the least Iannucci-like. I watched the whole film without thinking this sounds like Veep, or and a lot of that I think is because it's a period piece. It's set in early England, so a lot of the language is confined to the language of that era. I will say, in hindsight, it has a lot of his trademark humor in terms of the way he uses the camera and the way that the actors' physical actions sometimes are part of the joke he's going for. It certainly feels like a movie that he made, but yeah, I don't think it has much of his trademark dialogue because of that period setting. Aaron, you've seen this, right?
I have. Here's what I will say. I owe it a rewatch. This
Didn't
came
enjoy
out.
it?
I did not enjoy it, but it was during award season, and when I'm in award season, sometimes stuff just misses me. I'm plowing through movies, and I just remember my only memory of this movie is that it just felt like it tried to do too much. Everything felt like it was going so fast, and I didn't feel like I got to connect to what was going on because it was just always interested in the next thing. That's all I remember about watching this. I do owe it a rewatch, especially knowing that Anucci is part of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if I rewatched this and loved it more for its heart because, like you said, I think it's got a big heart and I love that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if I liked it more if I rewatched it.
Yeah, I think this week one of the last episodes we did, I was talking about a movie that I didn't really enjoy, but I was trying to cram it in before our best of the year episodes. And
Yeah, sometimes that'll happen. Chris, why don't you go next so I'm not just like talking.
All right. I finally caught up to the show Invincible on Amazon, the animated superhero show, and this is about a guy by the name of Mark Grayson, voiced by Stephen Yeun, whose dad is Omni-Man. He is like the Superman, like even more Superman than Superman. His father is Omni-Man, played by J.K. Simmons, of course, because you gotta have J.K. Simmons. His mom is played by Sandra Oh, who has some of the best moments of the series, I think. And there's just a laundry list of just amazing actors who come in and just do small voices throughout all the episodes and everything. But the main crux of this in the first season, Omni-Man destroys a whole team of superheroes, and we don't know why. And he's struggling with that. And meanwhile, his kid doesn't have the powers that he's expecting him to have. But of course, right around the time he turns 18, he gets the powers, and then he starts training his son for something he thinks it's just training him to be a superhero, but it's really much more than that, because it's the planet he comes from and the philosophy of that planet that they have about the planets that they visit and everything. And meanwhile, there's all sorts of other just crazy things that happen in this show where just all sorts of different villains show up. Basically, they look like the end boss of any video game that you've ever seen, but they're always like, it's always like dispatched as soon as possible. But there's a lot of like really good stuff in this. I really enjoy the family drama of Invincible. A lot. Zazie Beetz plays Mark's girlfriend. Gillian Jacobs plays a character named Adam Eve, who's really good. She got her own. That character got her own episode, even I think between seasons, which was also very good. But the whole first season is about leading up to why did Omni-Man do this, and then the second season is how does Mark deal with all this without his dad, and where did his dad go, and everything. It's really, really good. I don't know if I'm selling it enough, but it's because there's so much that happens, but it's also type of show you want to like figure all this stuff out for yourself. You want to find it out for yourself. So I picked this up. I had heard enough about it when the second season came out that I was just like, okay, I'll just go ahead and watch this. There's only 16 episodes, eight per season, so it's really good.
It is really good. In fact, I may take some flack for this. I think it's better than The Boys. Now they're doing two separate things. The Boys is clearly satire that's making a point about modern, actually a lot of the same points that Quiz Show is making that we will get into about modern technology and those kind of things. But Invincible is a drama. It's a real drama with real characters that are going through real evolutions and changes, not just the Invincible character, but as we get into season 2, some of these other main characters who we thought maybe were one note are actually like, how in the world are they bringing depth to this character? And I've been really impressed with the way Invincible has treated its storytelling.
That's the thing. It populates this with a whole bunch of characters. Of course, Walton Goggins has a character in here who's great in this too. But you follow his character. You follow someone who's kind of like an assistant in the second season. You think he's just kind of like a cleaner kind of guy, like just kind of a business whatever, but he's got a lot of stuff going on with him that's like really interesting. I love the two characters who the clone characters the guy's always making a clone of himself whenever one of his clones dies, and they keep accusing each other of being the clone or chiding the other for being the clone when they don't know who the clone is. And those characters are really interesting. It's just populated with a lot of like very interesting people. Every time they show up on screen, it's fun. So I was surprised. I'm usually don't get into this kind of stuff, but this is really well made.
Yeah, I think it's good.
God damn it, I'll have to add it to my list.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm not sure if you want to add this one to your list or not. I really, really liked it. For my small recommend, I'm going with Birth. This is a movie from 2004, directed by Jonathan Glazer, who has won recent acclaim for Zone of Interest. I checked this out on Criterion Channel before it left the channel in April. This is a story starring Nicole Kidman. So point number one for this movie, Nicole Kidman is in it. She's amazing. And she is someone whose husband dies. He's out for a run, and he goes down. And then 10 years later, a little boy shows up claiming to be him, a 10-year-old boy. Claiming to be the reincarnation of her husband. And the movie becomes a mystery/thriller, asking the question, asking you as the audience to go, what do you think? Is this boy really her reincarnated husband or not? And I think it's really...
Actually, it's not.
Well, the movie makes a choice too, and I find that really interesting. But I'm not going to give it away here, but I really loved it. And what I will say is the movie does a great job at walking that tightrope and giving you those moments of, oh, actually, how could this happen if it was this way? Or, oh, now it can't be this way. So like, there's a lot of like, it kept me mentally engaged in the question throughout the movie. Lauren Bacall is in this as well, as her mother. Some other faces you might know, like Anne Heche, Danny Huston, people you might. Ted Levine shows up in this, my detective friend from Monk. So yeah, lots of fun stuff here, and I think this is well worth a watch. So,
Birth man, I saw this movie when it came out. I do not remember liking it, but much like you with David Copperfield, I may have to just give this a rewatch because both you and Jonathan have been talking about how this movie was actually good. So, so I may have to give this another one. I think possibly that the subject matter of this movie turned me off enough that I was just like, I don't know, but
sure.
Who knows? Maybe 20 years from the point that it came out, I'll be totally okay with the subject matter.
So and just to clarify, because that might be a trigger for some that I would want to give. There are elements of this where the little boy, 10-year-old boy, is talking about his past life relationship with this grown woman, and so there is this ick factor of how they are handling, even these conversations about physical intimacy, right? So the movie never goes there, although there is one scene where they share a space that is a little like awkward. But even the conversations can feel icky. So there's definitely that element to it. I think that's what you were talking about, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, on to our big recommend, and I think our strategy of having Aaron talk for 45 minutes straight did not work out in the way we did this, because he is going to be the guy talking about Quiz Show.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
Well, since I'll be talking for a while, if you guys don't mind, for the plot summary, I'd like to take the last part first. This movie is transcendent and continues to become more relevant as each day goes by. 1994's Quiz Show, directed by Robert Redford and nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, by the way, starts with a car sale in progress. Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School, is being wooed by a slick car salesman in the beauty of hand-rubbed pigskin and lambskin. As the radio informs us of Sputnik's launch, the movie has already set the hook of its themes of what's for sale, what lies will be used to sell it, who's willing to buy it, and what is the actual cost. We then cut to a bank vault where the questions for this night's episode of 21, a game show, are being brought to the studio. As the host Jack Barry quotes some of Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, we get the sense for what a production this game show is and the aura of the secrecy of these questions. We also find out that Herbert Stemple has been winning for a while, but somehow isn't really that nervous about it, and also really, really likes Geritol and its effect on waking up his wife's blood. We then see a cascade of calls initiated by the director of Hugo, who apparently also runs Geritol. He calls the president of NBC, who calls the show's directors, showing us not only that they want Stemple out, but exactly how the power dynamic flows down the chain. We then meet the Van Dorns. Charlie is watching the same show live as his mom and dad take turns being extremely witty and lovable. Herbert wins, and we get a sense that he really loves the attention he gets from his fame, because who wouldn't, after all? Meanwhile, Van Dorn has been smitten by these quiz shows and decides to try out for tic-tac-toe, but Mo Sizlak spots him and immediately wants to snipe him for 21. They drag him in and try to convince him and then ask him whether or not he'd be comfy knowing the answers ahead of time. After some discussion of how Immanuel Kant might feel about it, he says no and asks if that was indeed part of the test. Then, as if an astute observation has led to laughter, they are laughing. We then reconnect with Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School, back at the office looking into oversights. That's where you guys say, it's an oversight,
It's an oversight committee.
Thank you. Anyhow, you get the sense that he is tenacious and principled and has an accent that doesn't exist in the real world, but is a blast to listen to anyway. Then it's back to Stemple, who is being wined and dined and told to take a dive by answering a movie question with On the Waterfront when he clearly knows the answer is Marty. This upsets him, so he heads home and is complaining to his son so much that it convinces his wife that ulcers are contagious. She then says he should answer the question correctly anyway. But as Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School, and the director of Silence watch on, Stemple decides to play ball and answers On the Waterfront, even though even the camera guy knows it should be Marty. We then go to Van Dorn, and he gets waylaid by being asked a question he already answered from his interview. And now he is the one with a moral dilemma, but he chooses to answer it correctly, and it's CVDFTW, at least for now. Van Dorn then wrestles with this moral choice for about the time it takes to walk halfway down the stairs, at which point he remembers he won $20K, and he's immediately in. His ascent is co-montaged with Stemple's descent, as no one will take Herbie's calls, and he eventually goes to the authorities about having to take this dive. This leads to a John Turturro acting masterclass scene in which, after coming outside the top 42 in panel show popularity and being offered $50 a week, he threatens to burn the whole thing down. Meanwhile, Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School, has had his curiosity piqued by the sealed court case on these quiz show hearings. He sells his higher-ups on it enough to get a few days to dig around in New York. After a judge, who apparently is in the pocket of the show, waves him away, he goes door to door with former contestants, eventually leading him to have a meeting with Van Dorn himself. But Van Dorn is too busy tying his shoes and basking in the giggles of young co-eds, so they decide to meet the next day. Then they have a meal together where Chuck's dad shows up to give some salient poker advice and show off by knowing there is a K in Nebraska. Next up, Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School but didn't get a tattoo about it, finally meets Stemple, who is amazed a Jew got into Harvard and tells him the fix is in. After that, it's on to a birthday party for Daddy Van Dorn, where his poetry is interrupted by his son's fame. After Baby Van Dorn shocks them with his winning totals, he and Papa Van Dorn have a Shakespeare off, and Charlie pleads for his dad's attention and approval by giving him a television. Next up is Enright and Friedman, who do some tag team gaslighting so well that Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class at Harvard Law School, buys it. But then Stimple ambushes Goodwin and drops the big bomb. He knows Van Dorn is getting the answers because he got the answers too. Dickie can't figure out why Stimple would say that if it wasn't true, and also can't figure out Van Dorn's motive until his wife cracks the case by pointing out the size of his father's shadow. This leads Dick to tell Chuck at poker that he knows he's lying, but Van Dorn is a pedantic jerkface and corrects him that the word is bluffing. After this, Van Dorn enjoys some late-night milk and cake with his pops, which leads to a conversation where he laments the loss of his innocence, and his dad expresses his pride in him, which then, of course, just makes it all the worse. Meanwhile, Richard Goodwin, who was first in his class of watching old game show reels at Harvard Film School, is combing through the episodes of 21 and stumbles on a time when a contestant kind of smirked after surprising Jack Barry with the correct answer. A visit to that contestant leads to a proof-giving registered letter in some of the most egregious, yes, I know what it means, apple eating in film history. Dick tries to meet up with the president of NBC, and after catching him leaving his office, he drops the bomb that he has Enright, so he has NBC. But Kittner and his non-sweating brow remain unconvinced. Finally, the heat gets too much for Van Dorn, who dumps an answer at the same episode that Dickie just happens to be attending. But NBC keeps its hooks in him by offering him a panel show. Meanwhile, Dickie confronts Enright with his rock-solid proof in the actual studio so that we can see Goodwin gleefully turn down that same panel show hook and also see Enright absolutely demolished. Next up, it's Richard Goodwin, first in his class at not being a member of your GD fan club at Harvard Simp School, meets up with Van Dorn one final time to tell him they aren't coming after him just as long as he stays out of it. Then it's on to the trial. Then it's on to the hearings. I don't know the difference. Stimple gives his testimony and treats it like he's trying to do a tight 15 at the local open mic night because he's just happy to be back in the spotlight and let people know that he knew it was Marty and that Van Dorn is a bigger fraud than even he is. And Dickie's starting to realize he can't control the circus like he thought he possibly could. Even his wife thinks he has to call Van Dorn in because she can't understand why he is protecting him, just like his uncle named Thomas might do. Later, Kittner strong-arms Van Dorn into signing a statement. Then Dickie has a conversation with the director of Bringing Out the Dead, and he gives a slick smile as he admits everything while admitting nothing. The hearings continue as the bigwigs seem to be made of Teflon, and Van Dorn's coerced statement will now force Dick to bring him into this whole thing, even though he didn't want to do it. This leads younger VD to consult with elder VD in perhaps the best scene in the film, where he admits that he just can't tell the truth. After Daddy Dorn recovers from the shock and the hurt, he pushes back and helps his son understand how names work, and eventually agrees to go with him as he does the hard work of coming clean. So Van Dorn gives his honest testimony, and after a few appreciative words from the committee, one true New Yorker lays him out for his delayed actions. All that's left now is for Enright to take the fall, NBC and Geritol to keep making money, Goodwin to help us truly fear that television will destroy us all, and future Penthouse contributor Albert Friedman to draw the direct line between politics and show business and really help us end the movie by knowing the script for The Fall of Mankind is already written. As the audience laughs over the credits, we are left to ponder what we will do now that we have the answers. And that is Quiz Show. What did you guys think of Quiz Show coming back to it?
Obviously, Quiz Show is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I am getting to watch this movie again. It had been a while since I had given it a viewing. It's always just like I don't know, well-fitting glove, right? Like you just like you put it in, and it's like, yeah, this is oh my god, this is this is my friend here. Quiz show is my friend. And there's probably some weird sexual metaphors with that comparison there. I love this movie. I think that the thing that I noticed the most about this viewing is just the class differences between our three leads. Herbert Stemple is the lower middle class person here. Dick Goodwin is obviously middle class. He's at the beginning when he's looking at this car, he's thinking about he can't afford the car, obviously. But he's in a position where maybe one day he can afford that car.
Yeah.
And that's why he's in there right at that point. And but he tells exactly where his class is when he says the finest piece of furniture would be in the garage. And then you have Van Doren, who is the privileged upper class person here. However, the reason that he does the things that he does in this movie is that he is in the shadow of his father. He doesn't have money himself. He makes $82 a week as a professor at Columbia University, which is insane when you think about it. But like, he doesn't make his own money. If he wants to get something, he's going to have to ask dad about it. Now his dad probably will give him anything that he wants, but he's finally found something where it's like, well, maybe I can do this and I can make my own name out of it. So I love the class clashes here. I also love the fact that when Dick Goodwin goes to the Van Doren house, he sees that Chrysler 300 out there, and he was talking about how he was looking at one, and here Van Doren's just got one just hanging out in the parking lot or whatever, the driveway. And everything. I also the other thing about this movie is at the end, everybody who lies ends up getting rewarded at the end of this movie. Every single person who lies gets rewarded, and everybody who tells the truth ends up getting destroyed. Every single one of them that tell the truth. Van Doren, of course, is making his way through this movie, and everybody just gives him deference. Even Dick Goodwin gives him deference, even though he knows for a fact this guy is dirty. He still wants to be his friend. He wants to be like, I want to be buddies with you, man. I want to, like, because we're kind of the same. We're the same intellectually. And like, we would, if the things were different, we would be best buds. We would be going out on the boat, and we'd be like, sailing around talking about our old days when people used to punch us in the face for being nerds and all the other stuff. But and then when finally, Van Doren takes that privilege way too far, and Van Doren's in a place where I don't know where he's supposed to go, though, by the end of this movie. Because the president of NBC is saying, I want you to lie about this. And then if you don't lie, basically the implication is you're going to get fired. And he doesn't really have much of a choice other than I guess he could have just quit or something and just took himself out of the situation, but instead he decided to make a nice flowery speech complete with Icarus references and stuff at the end, which of course leads to one of the best scenes of the movie where all the senators want to, like, kiss his ass after that. I'm like, oh, look at somebody who did something wrong and is admitting it. That makes all the things you did wrong good now. And then finally you have the one guy who's like, I come from a different part of New York, and I don't think someone should be applauded for at long last telling the truth. And he gets the, the Disney slow clap after that. But yeah, this movie is just so good, man. I could watch it after this podcast and be totally fine spending another 2 hours watching this.
It's funny how watching a movie for this podcast reveals new things to me, even in a movie I've seen 20 times. I feel like Charles and Herbert are motivated by different things. Charles is motivated by fame, and probably the desire to get his father's approval. Herbert is motivated by credit, respect, and they both end up taking similar paths with regard to 21, even though their reasons are slightly different. I've always viewed this movie as about fame, strictly as about fame, because you get that scene. It's so innocent, but it feels key when he's being driven to the college and the kids aren't coming out yet, and he waits and pretends to tie his shoe until the kids come out of the thing, and then he gets out of the car and he's mobbed by all the kids. It's clear he's intoxicated by this fame, but Stempel's motivation isn't that at all. It's not even, I don't think, the money. I think it's just he wants people to know he's smart. And I'd never really thought about those two having really different motivations, even though those motivations lead them both to basically do what the show wants them to do. I also started looking at how many times Charles digs his own grave here. Like early on, Dick doesn't suspect Charles at first. This is just a perfunctory, I've got to interview all of these people. He doesn't think for a second that this ultra rich, ultra smart guy is on the take, but Charles slowly starts giving him tells. Like he asks the question during their meal, and instead of answering it, Charles repeats Enright's name. Now you can reach him at NBC, and then takes a bite of his sandwich so he won't have to answer. And there's a shot. It cuts to Dick, and he kind of looks at him a little weird. And I feel like that's the first moment Dick's like, this guy's hiding something from me. And if Charles was just a little bit better an actor, he might have been able to get away with it. The biggest mistake he makes, in my opinion, is inviting Dick out to his family picnic, because at that event, I think it all falls apart between Dick and Charles. By the end of that event, I think Dick realizes this guy's dirty. This guy's, I got to investigate this guy now. And I love that scene. And if you watch that scene, Dick doesn't say much of anything. He's asked who he is early on, but most of it is Dick watching how this family interacts, watching how Charles so clearly needs obsessively his father's approval and pride. And that's where the onion starts to unpeel, I think. I love the different levels of intelligence in this movie, because this movie's full of really smart people, but almost everyone who is smart in this movie has an opportunity to correct somebody else who is smart in this movie. Like Stemple won a ton of quiz show games, but doesn't understand the difference between squashed and quashed until Dick points it out to him. Everybody also gets a chance to be disappointed in someone else. Dick is disappointed in Charles. Charles' dad is disappointed in him. Charles is disappointed in Dick, though that's not justified. Herb's disappointed in everyone. Herb's wife is disappointed in him. I think this movie has a lot to say about how other people see us. And I think there's a really important parallel between the Van Dorn father-son and the Stemple father-son, because that Stemple kid is on track to turn out exactly like his father, because of who his father is. I have always thought the elder Van Dorn was a saint in watching this movie. Especially as you pointed out, Chris, when after their confrontation, after he reels from this devastating knowledge, he pretty quickly goes, all right, what are we going to do? How can I support you? But this viewing, I'm a lot more torn. That picnic scene in particular, I don't know that he was a great father all through life.
I don't think the movie lets him off the hook for putting Charles in this emotional position. I don't think the movie lets him off the hook for that.
No, I don't think it does. But I have not really ever paid much attention to that, negative impact he had on Charles's life, because he is in many scenes shown to be a really great father. But I think also one of the points of the movie is that we can't help but impart onto our kids part of who we are, no matter how much we might try not to. I've danced all over my notes, but there's a few other things I wanted to get in here. 3 people in tiny roles that went on to be famous: Ileana Douglas, Callista Flockhart, William Fichtner. I love when that happens in movies. When I go back to see a movie, and I'm sure I've recognized these people before, but seeing, oh, that William Fichtner. I don't even know if he has a line of dialogue in this movie. He's just the stage manager.
And then you have famous Ethan Hawke showing up just randomly talking about Don Quixote at the end.
I also think, okay, first of all, Azaria and Paymer, I think, need to be inducted into the Double Team Con Men Hall of Fame. They're back and forth, the way they work people, especially Van Dorn in that first meeting when it's like it's good cop, bad cop, basically. And they're incredible. But their hubris is part of the problem here. If they had just let Stemple lose on a physics question like he asked, instead of forcing him to embarrass himself by not knowing Marty, I don't know if he's quite as angry after he's done. He's kind of, at that dinner, he's accepting it. He's like, all right, well, maybe I'll get a panel show, let me lose on a physics question. And he's like, no, you're gonna lose on Marty.
No, man, that panel show seems very important to him.
It does.
Afterwards.
It does.
And I think the losing on that question certainly is a driver in all of this. By the way, thank
God,
God,
him a panel show too.
Yeah. By the way, good thing Google wasn't in charge of Best Picture years and stuff like that, or else On the Waterfront would have been the correct answer, according to
I love the bit when he explains why Columbus called them Indians. I love when he's telling his kid they're Indians because some white guy got lost. I've always loved that little story. Let's see. I think I'm almost done. The father's speech to Charles at the end is devastating. When he does the "Your name is my name," it kills me because I am a son of a father and I want my father's approval. I think all of us do. But I think that "Your name is my name" kind of thinking is a generational kind of, I'm not sure I put as much stock in that as the movie does. I think it wrecks me because I'm a son and I want to please my father. But it's a lot of goddamn pressure. This is part of why Charles is in the position he's in, is because he has your fucking name, and it's a lot to live up to.
And think about this too. The whole reason he did this was to make a name for himself. Like he's arguably become the most famous Van Doren after he does this quiz show.
Yep.
And once he gets into scandal and everything, now what do people think of when they think about the poet Mark Van Doren, or they think about this? They're going to think, oh, the Van Doren, like the cheating quiz show guy, Van Doren. That's exactly what you're going to think, right?
Yep. Anyway, I used to love that dad like a saint. Now I see some flaws.
I still love him like a saint. I have to start my further notes by just saying all hail Paul Schofield. I think he is astonishing in this movie. Every scene, the way he holds the scene, that "Your name is mine" scene, the way he is destroyed and devastated by, wait, you were lying this whole time? Like, it's so perfectly conveyed. He absolutely deserved the nomination he got for Best Supporting Actor that year.
And not to break right into your own thing here, but that line too, where it's like, they gave you all that money for answers to questions that you already know. Now that's inflation.
Yeah, he's given some. Everybody in here has given some great lines to say. But I think he is absolutely incredible. So I wanted to start with that. It's interesting, Chris, you mentioned the slow clap at the end and the guy from a different, place in New York, putting him in his place. I think that with that applause, the movie again is bringing home this point that everything is a performance. Even this guy who is saying true things, and it's not like they're not true things. He's performing to an audience. Politics is performative. TV is performative. The world is becoming so performative that what is true, what isn't true, like those ideas are so hard to figure out when everything is just a performance. And boy, do we see it today. It just gets more and more relevant as time goes on. It's like it's interesting. I was looking at the and I'd never done this before this viewing. The poem that Jack Barry is reciting at the beginning. I think I mentioned it was Eugene O'Neill. Is this poem? It's just a paragraph poem, but one of the lines says, "That's what I wanted, to be alone with myself in another world where truth is untrue and life can hide from itself."
Wow.
And it's this idea, the poem is this man standing in a fog and going, what is true and what is untrue? I kind of like the comfort of not knowing. Like, and that is the audience. The audience is like, does it matter what's true or not true? I'm being entertained. I'm having a good time. I'm the man in the fog. I don't know that it matters, It's just the movie is so specific and so razor sharp with its themes that it just every time something new will reveal itself to me. There's a moment where I forget who it is that says it. Maybe you guys can remind me, but just make the questions easier and they tune in to watch the money.
Scorsese.
I think it's Scorsese. Yeah. It's during that scene. He's like, it doesn't matter. Why cheat? Just make the questions easier. And you look today, and there's literally a game show where people just drop balls to land in money because it does none of that matters. I think it's called The Wall, and it's just like they bring on people who deserve the money, and then people just watch them win a bunch of money because that's all it is. It's just people, wanting to watch money.
I think it's a streaming service. Has a game show. The host is an actress that I remember from a show. I watched 15 minutes of this thing, and it was literally the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Like, which of these two animals shown to you is a cat? Like, it was the dumbest. Like, first graders could answer these questions,
right.
And I think the point of the show is that the contestants are perfectly average people. They're not people coming in that claim to have trivia knowledge or anything. But I was so dismayed by watching that. I was like, what? This doesn't need to exist, but they are just watching the money on that show. That's what they're watching.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Wanted to mention some new standout lines for me. When Stimple says, fed to the Columbia Lions, watch Van Doren eat his first kosher meal. That one popped out to me this time. Just the beautiful, fed to the Lions, but it's the Columbia Lions. And yeah, I thought that was pretty great. Think about what McCarthyism did for McCarthy stood out to me this time. Really drawing that line to politics. And it's like, you don't want to be McCarthy, but that made his career, man. It's just how everything is performative. And I think I was more aware this time than ever before of how directly Redford is tying the line to politics. I've always known it was about television and it was about performance and those kind of things. But very specifically, over the course of the movie, several times, he makes it clear that it's not just, television impacting us as an audience in entertainment. It's also how performance impacts politics. And
how many times do we see the conflict of interest that judges and senators have in these things? Like the one judge who seals the presentment at the beginning is buddies with Dan Enright, and then you have the senator who's like sitting there. He's I don't know if it's groveling or if he's just like self-deprecating in front of Kittner, talking about, oh man, I was in that sound trap, man, and Kittner's like, yeah, man, you were in there for a whole hour, blah blah blah. And then once the cameras roll, that's when it's like, okay, let's pretend like we have some animosity here, and I'm going to ask you some really tough questions, friend that I was playing golf with earlier.
And then the line that I've always loved, I think it's my favorite line delivery in response in the movie, is when Dick Goodwin sets up Enright and Friedman by saying Stimple has this idea that every time a Jew's on, then he's replaced by a Gentile who wins more money, and they laugh and laugh, and then he's like, here's the thing, I looked into it. He was right. And the way he delivers that line is so perfect. It's so good.
Well, and every time Dan Enright gets that kind of treatment, he steps back a little bit in himself, and he's like, "Oh, we'll look into it, I guess." You know, and
Yeah.
you know, and the same thing happens later when he's getting confronted after that last show, and you know, Goodwin says, I've got the envelope that's got, you know, the answers in it, registered mail. That's what Snodgrass sent to himself.
Right. Yeah.
Everything. He goes, this is after Enright saying, you don't have any evidence at all. And this is, he says, I think that's pretty goddamn concrete, don't you? And so that's when he has to sit down finally. He's been standing this whole time, and he sits down. That other thing I've always loved, my favorite scene of the movie is Dick Goodwin and Charles Van Doren in the room, and Dick finally saying, I've had enough of your bullshit. Basically, he's like, don't treat me so like I'm some member of your goddamn fan club. Yeah. And but there's right after that, Charles Van Doren says, I envy you, Dick. And Dick is like, was it all just about the money, Charlie? And Charlie's like, you got to forgive me that anybody who has any money would, he says, you would have to forgive me. Anybody that thinks money is just money can't have very much of it. And he goes, well, you can insult me, fine, Charlie, but you can't envy me at the same time.
It's so good. Oh, it's so good.
So yeah, there's a lot of like great, just that the whole like final 30 minutes zooms by like nothing.
I think the whole movie is so tightly put together and just maintains attention, zooms by, and it's like a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, and it just doesn't feel like it's that long. It's just really, really good. I also want to shout out Azaria, who I think has a really fun performance in this, and he's just kind of that lowest common denominator. He's making like whack off motions, and you know, doesn't know anything. He's an idiot. Like, it's just the best.
What the hell's egregious mean?
Yeah, the egregious part is great, and I love how he says that, and then immediately Dan Enright doesn't even acknowledge that because he wants to have the questions in advance, and then but there's the other part too, where you're talking about earlier in your synopsis, when he says, I wonder what Kant would think of this. And he turns to Dan, Hank Azaria turns to Dan, and he goes, I think he'd be okay with it. Yeah, so good.
My final question for you guys. I was noticing again so many of the crumbs that this movie leaves for us to love about truth and the themes and stuff. You know, what would Abe Lincoln do? What would Honest Abe think of this? The ode to a Grecian urn, truth is beauty, beauty is truth. Like, it's dropping all of these things. The truth has its price, you know, is in there as well. Is the movie's one flaw that maybe it does too much? Like, is it too on the nose with a lot of that stuff? I don't think so. I love every single moment, but like, I just wonder if like that could be maybe the flaw that's leveled at it.
You may be onto something there about some of those things. Like, I thought they kind of shoehorned a thing towards the it's before the big Dick Goodwin, Charles Van Doren thing, when we've already been told that Snodgrass was supposed to answer a question that involved Emily Dickinson. And then later on, there's a point where, you know, Dick says something about King Baudouin after Van Doren has just said a Dickinson quote. And then he's a King Baudouin, and he's like, Emily Dickinson, actually, you know, but yeah, there are some things like that, but I think some of those are some of those are a little bit more natural, and they don't like, I don't know if they hammer you right in the head with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think they're kind of to the side. They're glancing blows, but they're not like they're not like right on the nose.
Well, it's like that Fog poem. Like, they don't like, it's just Jack Barry reciting a couple lines, and it's not even the lines that are pertinent to the theme that he's reciting. Like, you have to do that extra level of digging. So yeah, I think it keeps it subtle enough that even with the amount of the illusions and those kind of things, that it never feels ham-fisted. I think you're right.
My only question about this movie is the focus that Goodwin has on television itself. Like, I thought we're gonna get television. Like, as if television is the main problem here. And I couldn't help but think, because it's directed by a movie star, and there was that long, I don't know if you guys ever heard this growing up, but there was that long standing thing among actors to never do television. And I think the reason was that if you did television, you were reducing your brand in some way, that if you're going to go to television, you're never going to be in movies again. And this is something that I think Rod Steiger told Natalie Portman on the set of Mars Attacks at one point, is that don't ever do television because of this and everything. And I couldn't help but think, well, are movies themselves not a part of this problem, or is it just TV, the immediacy of TV, that is more of a problem in this society here and everything? It was kind of weird to me that it wasn't about just the quiz shows. And remember, it's not just this one. It's the $64,000 question. There's a couple of others that get reined in on this one as well. And at the end of it, Dick Goodwin's like, I wanted to get television. What is the deal with that, do you think?
I think it has to do with that it's a populist medium, that it's, that it is in the home. It can be in every home, whereas a movie is like something you attend, something you go out to. So it's a little more of an effort. But I think the movie is making the direct point that Goodwin is wrong. He thought he was going after television, and what he doesn't realize is that television is just the tool that enhances those parts of human nature that are to perform, to gain fame, to gain power. Like that. Television is just a tool. It's just representative. Now it's TikTok or Facebook or whatever. These are now the new technological tools that just emphasize the wrong parts of humanity, and they it's just this never-ending process towards, our own doom. So
I always feel simplistic now because that's all very deep and profound, but I always took that line to just mean that's his mourning the fact that everything's just going to keep going. The corruption, the lying, the money changing hands, that's all going to keep going. He thought what he was doing was going to have a meaningful impact on stopping that kind of corruption. And it didn't.
Well, and it just goes to show, by the way, and then it's the tying into what you're saying, Aaron, about how it's going into today. Whenever you keep letting people just do the thing, even if you think they're very minor, if you keep letting people do these certain things, they're just going to keep coming back and with more of a vengeance later on, because they know they can't be like, taken out of the equation anymore. I mean, Dan Enright comes back with Jack Barry for The Joker's Wild right after this.
Yeah.
After he's lied and because he was a fall guy, they were just like, all right, well, let's just we'll give you a couple years and then you'll be back as a producer again. We don't see any harm in that. So we keep seeing, people who should probably be sent to prison or like punished in some way keep getting away with things, and it's like, well, they're just going to keep on coming, they're going to up the ante as they go on further on.
That's why the movie plays today, man. That's happening more than ever. The people with money and power don't get in trouble. They just keep doing wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we get into the super secret double feature?
No, that was a swarthy discussion.
Yes, it was.
Be very, very quiet.
Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
All right, on to the super secret double feature. I will go ahead and say that I have long already had a double feature for this movie. I've had a triple feature with this movie for a very long time, and I've had the way I've thought about this type of thing, like you could have a triple feature with this, but All the President's Men is going to be my double feature for this.
Robert Redford.
The Redford connection. Just think about also Dick Goodwin making his investigation, how this happens. He's going door to door and nobody wants to say a thing. They are all scared of what might happen if they say the truth. And with Herb Stempel, it's about, I might not get a panel show. All these other people obviously have signed like an NDA or something like that. And they're going to get sued if they say anything or something. I don't know what's going on with them, but he goes door to door and like nobody wants to say anything until he finally finds the right people who are just like, I give no fucks anymore. I'm going to show you what I did. But I think the same thing. It's sort of the same thing with All the President's Men. You have their investigation is so difficult all the way through because nobody wants to say anything for fear of getting not only like in severe trouble but killed over it. It's just the way everything goes. The other movie would be JFK. JFK has the same sort of deal too, even though JFK is, it's not as based in reality as these other movies are. But I've always thought it was interesting that like you had what is it? You had All the President's Men came out around the time of the thing that happened, and then JFK came out, and it was I'm trying to think of the order on this. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all that whole thing. So yeah. Anyway, All the President's Men is my double feature.
I love that. I went a little different direction. I was trying to find a movie match about a liar falling from grace, basically, is where I started. And once I found Catch Me If You Can, lots of things fell into place here, including the father dynamic, including the soundtrack, a lot of the music. We're in a similar era here. Both films focus on both the liar and the investigator. And I just couldn't shake it once I got on that. I wrote down 5 other movies about Falls from Grace that would be good double features, but this one was just too perfect. I think the tone is similar. Yeah, I just think it's a really, really good pair. They go hand in hand. So that was my super secret double feature. Catch me if you can.
Okay, so Jeremy, once again, will be gone for the next 6 months. Enjoy that, by the way.
Thank you.
That's gonna be awesome.
I'll go ahead and tell you, I hope you forget, but I have plans at some point in this 6 months to pop in to the chat for an episode of Recotopia.
All right.
I don't know when it'll be, but I'm going to do that. But yes, I'll see you guys in 6 months, and I'm looking forward to the break. And the show is in excellent hands. So,
and since Jeremy will not be here next week, it is my turn to pick again, and we're finally done with the decades of comedy thing that I started, I think, 5 years ago. We are going to go into the 2020s, and this movie just came out on VOD and was a small recommend a few episodes ago. Hundreds of Beavers is going to be the big recommend next week. And I can't wait to talk about this movie and all of its different aspects and hilarity next week. So there you go. I believe
good luck with your plot synopsis.
Exactly. There may not be much of one, that's for sure. But anyway, that will be next week. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Once again, thank you, chat, for coming out here and watching us talk for an hour about this movie. And we will see you next time. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Be a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com.
You left us.
I was getting tired of your
just
rambling on. Like, what are we doing here? Outtakes for a show? This is ridiculous. Come on.
I see, you bastard.
What did you think of the Detroit Lions draft, Aaron?
Okay, I'm glad you asked, because I don't care a flying hootenanny flyer of flyers about the NFL draft, and it confuses me why people get so into it. Like, I'm just like, I looked at the crowds in Detroit, and I'm just going, have we lost our minds? This is the draft. Most of these players will never be stars. Like, it's just, I don't know. I have no idea who the Detroit Lions drafted. I will show up next season and watch them play football and go, oh, that's a cool new play. Like, I'm not that kind of sports fan. So
I'm the same way. Unless my team has like the top pick, I don't really give a rat's ass.
correct. That would be the difference. Yeah.
And the NFL has kind of done a magic trick here in turning this draft into an event that people not only watch on television, but like you said, gather in bars and in homes and watch all around the country. And it boggles my mind. We don't do that for any other sport. Like you said, most of these guys are not going to be stars.
Well, I care more than you guys, but I care way less than a person who would want to go to a live draft would care about going to the I don't care about, I don't watch any of the the mock draft stuff and people who are like, well, they could take this guy at whatever, and I'm like, by the time pick 4 comes around, all of your fucking bullshit is going to be, all that time you wasted talking about this is going to be done. And so I don't get into any of that. I also don't get into well, how did this team do in the draft or whatever? It's like, you don't know until these people are actually on the field and how they use them and all that. There's so many players every year that you never heard of in your life that are suddenly the big stars, the big rookie stars. Like, oh, did that guy get drafted high? Like, no, he didn't.
Well, if you just look at the Lions, like the Lions have been said to have terrible drafts the last, several years or whatever. And those drafts are why they are good now. Like it's like just nobody knows anything. Like it's like, why are they drafting? They don't need a running. And it's like, okay, yeah, but look what they're doing. I don't know. It's I guess the only way I do care is if there are players who are going to get drafted that I've rooted for, like JJ McCarthy. Like, I was interested knowing how high is he going to go, because at first he was going to be like in the late teens, and then it was like he's going to be the number 4 pick, and it's just like, that's interesting to me because I've rooted for that guy. But like, other than that, like, I don't even know who my team took. I guess that makes me a bad fan. But
you'll know him soon enough.
Chris, do you know who took Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I don't, right off the bat.
I'll look it up.
He was the 2nd pick. No, he was the 4th pick, because that was Arizona. Arizona got him.
Yep, Arizona.
Because the first 3 picks were all quarterbacks, and then the 4th pick was him.
I didn't figure he would go to the Colts, but that's the only college player I'm even aware of in this draft. I don't know any other players in this draft, but because I'm a Colts fan, I know that one former Colt has a kid who was good, who was in this draft.
Well, these guys get caught up in a lot of other things too. Like the Titans got a right tackle, and they need a left tackle, and they're like, well, how is he going to go to left? He's a right tackle. How is he going to be a left tackle? It's like, it's not the same. I understand it's not the same position, but
let's be clear.
Can you are you saying that someone is incapable of learning left tackle after being at right tackle? This is like someone playing left field, and they're like, we're going to put you in right. Oh no, what is going to happen?
That's what the Orioles fans did when they said Jackson Holliday's going to play second. They're like, he's a shortstop. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the same fucking position.
You have to learn the nuances for sure. There's no doubt about it. There are differences in those positions, but to say they can't just learn and train and get better at the position that they're not at usually is absurd.
Those throws are going to be 15 foot shorter to first base. How will he compensate?
Exactly.
I do love that part in Moneyball where they're recruiting Chris Pratt. He's like, oh, first base is easy. We'll teach you. Tell him. And he's like, it's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I was always at first in Little League because I was tall.
Yep. They put the tall kids at first. Why did they do that?
For reach, apparently. Like, you can reach out.
You can hold your arm out.
I did not play first base.
Where did you play?
I played mostly right field. And I did play some third base. But But yeah, right field was the main thing. My big baseball claim to fame during rec league is just a big arm. I could throw it from anywhere and get to home plate or whatever if I had to. And so that was why I was in right field. I could field it pretty good, but like, you see how like major league players can track down balls that are over their head. I'm like, anything that hit over my head is a hit.
Yes. It's touching down.